Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group A. We present about decolonization. My name is Wan Muhammad Rafiq bin Wan Muhammad Rusdan as a leader from Kuliah of Engineering. Next.
My name is Aiman Akyum bin Muhammad Azuki and I'm from Kuliah of Engineering.
I'm Amal Muzakim and I'm from Kuliah of Engineering.
And Ismail and I from Kuliah Irrigation.
And my name is Ahmad Faiz bin Baidullah and I am from Kuliah of Engineering.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Izzat Muhammad Hadi bin Kamar Ahmad. I am from IRKHS. Assalamualaikum. My name is Izzat Muhammad Hadi bin Kamar Ahmad. My metric number is 1926977. Today we discuss about decolonization. Before that, we must know what is a decolonization is. Decolonization, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, process by which colonized become independent of the colonizing country. Decolonization was gradual and peaceful for some British colonists, largely settled by expatriates, but violent for others, where native rebellions were energized by nationalism. In terminology, colonization means a process or the situation that the centralized power system dominates by the colonized which are surrounding area. So it's a contrast with decolonization, that means a process liberalization from the grip of colonial power from physical point of view, material, political, economic, social and intellectual. Decolonization, there are many decolonization meaning. By example, Dean Kennedy, decolonization means the withdrawal of colonial power from colonies and the execution, liberation and independent politics and economy by the inhabitants of the colonies. Linda Tuhiel Smith also defined the colonization was largely understood as a process of surrender government instrument officially to the original inhabitants. Now intent as a long-term process involves the disposal of colonized power in bureaucratic aspect, culture, language and psychology. Carl Haig described the concept particularly applies to the dismantlement during second half of the 20th century of the colonized empire established prior to World War I throughout the world. Based on definition that was stated, decolonization can be concluded as one condition that a change of community condition from the under the colonial power to the get back the legitimation to their own country, freedom of economic, politics, social, cultural, also the freedom, liberalization of the intellectual and ideologies from the impact of colonization.
Assalamualaikum everyone. So today I would like to present my part, which is example of decolonization, and there are three countries that that related to the example of decolonization. So the first country is Malaysia, which is our beloved country. So during 1511, Malacca got colonized by Portuguese, which led by Alfonso de Albuquerque. Their goal to colonize Malacca related with 3 G's, which are gospel, glory and gold. So for gospel, they would like to spread their religion, which is Christianity, to Malacca. Then for glory, they would like to make it a pride for their country, which is Portugal, that they conquered almost all the world, so that they will look powerful in this world. Another one is gold, which is they want resources from Malaysia to do trading with their country and gain all the resources for their country. So moving on, during 1606 to 1608, Dutch East India Company and Johor take over Malacca from Portugal. And during 1786, British came to Penang, which known as Georgetown nowadays, and in 1900, British landed in Singapore. So during 1824, the Dutch and British had agreement to do separation from Malaya at that time and Indonesia. So British got Malaya while the Dutch got Indonesia. And during 1841, British got Sarawak, which led by James Brooke. In 1942, World War II happened, and Japanese get to conquer the whole Malaya from British. Three years after that, in 1945, British recaptured Malaya. A year then, in 1946, national movement such as UMNO, which known as United Malays National Organisation, led by the locals, are being founded to form the Federation of Malaysia. And finally, Malaya gained independence from British in 1957 due to diplomatic negotiation with British and in London. And in 1963, Malaysia is formed, which Singapore, Sarawak and North Borneo, which known as Sabah nowadays, joined forces to form Malaysia. But unfortunately, in 1965, Singapore withdrew from Malaysia due to political reasoning. Alright, moving on to the next country, which is Indonesia. So, the Dutch has landed in Indonesia in 1595 at West Java. The reason why the Dutch landed in Indonesia to gain natural resources and trading at first, but turns out the Dutch turned into colonial type establishment in 17th century, and there has many war occur between the locals and between the natives and the colonizer, such as Javanese War between 1825 to 1830, but unfortunately the Dutch wins. During 1825, the Dutch captured Palembang and continued to expand to the whole archipelago of Indonesia. The Dutch treated the natives and locals unfairly, and the main industry that the Dutch doing in Indonesia is agriculture. They want to export Indonesia resources such as pepper, sugar, cinnamon, tea and indigo. After the World War II, like what happened in Malaysia, the Japanese took over Indonesia too. But in 1945, the Japanese left Indonesia, and Sukarno, which leads Indonesia on that time, declared that Indonesia gained independence in 1945. During that time, there was a fight between the Dutch and locals, Indonesian, because the Dutch want to take over Indonesia, but the locals doesn't want and want independence. So they had a fight, annual war named Indonesian War of Independence. And finally, in 1949, the Dutch finally recognized Indonesia as an independent country and leave Indonesia. So last country, which is India. India was colonized by British at early stage. The Mughal Emperor, which led Mughal Empire at that time in India, gave permission to the British, which is at that moment is known as East India Company, give the permission to the British to trade in India in 1617. But as the time passed on and British getting want more, and finally in 1850 British conquer most of the India, and because due to the Mughal Empire started slowly declining and falling apart. In 1857, India had their first war of independence. British took control of India resources during 19th century to early 20th century. India's most influenced person, which is Mahatma Gandhi, launched peaceful movement to gain independence in early 20th century. World War II was a major turning point for the growing independence movement, for them to get independence from British. In 1942, India movement pressuring British to give independence, but they refused. They didn't want to give India independence. But so after that, the locals and the natives of India had war with British, but British had lost so much after World War II, so they can't recover and being pressured by the locals. So finally, in 1947, British gave independence to India, and on that year also, Pakistan and India got separated. And in 1971, Pakistan had war at East Bengal, which led to the form of country of Bangladesh, that nowadays. They had separation between them. So what I can conclude from my part is that, for example, our country, Malaysia, had been colonized by 4 powers, which is Portuguese, Dutch, British, and Japanese. None of them are doing great. None of them are doing good for our locals or natives. So we can't trust any of them because they are colonizer. Even though like Dutch is helping Johor to take over Malacca back, but actually they are colonizing Malaya too at the moment. They are faking it. So the conclusion is never trust outside power, and build our own power within our country, and never accept any help from outside party. That's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Amma Muzakim. My metric number is 2012217, and I'm from Group 8. Okay, now I will present the topic of decolonization from a Western point of view. The first Western scholar that I will tell us is from Dan Kennedy. Dan Kennedy, he is an Elmo Louis Kaiser Professor of History and International Affairs at George Washington University. Okay, now we can see from his point of view is that from his point of view, decolonization was he said that decolonization was a hard and intense process that turned the imperialist government against the colonial people. It also led to defeat of anti-colonial nationalists against each other. Yet, the two parties whose representatives did both held a sovereignty transfer ceremony as an excuse to minimize the chaos and trauma that preceded to confirm situation. For him, imperialist states that could not control the colonial people clearly preferred to describe their loss of power as an act of altruism. Okay, what the meaning of altruism? Altruism is the practice of prioritizing others over oneself. This practice is a pure nature in many cultures and is a staple to many religions in West culture. This idea is often described as the golden rule of ethics. Okay, we go to the next slide. Okay, the second Western figure, the second Western scholar that I will talk about is from Melanie Kayezi. Okay, Melanie Kayezi, she specialized in Navajo American Indian history, liberalism, settler colonization, and colonization. From her view, we can see that she said that this decolonization is not only an important call of the mind, but it is also a therapeutic healer for history that will be a liberation for everyone if we can liberate our minds through a return to culture. She tells us that Smith shows us decolonization is a dynamic struggle, workout, and dispute between the chaos of living beings, structures, forces, and dreams. In other words, the colonization is a historical amateur struggle. Okay, that's all from me in Western scholar opinion. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I will proceed to the worldview by the Muslim scholar on the decolonization. Okay, my name is Wan Muhammad Rafi bin Wan Muhammad Rusdan. I am from the Kuliah of Engineering. Okay, for the first decolonization by a Muslim scholar, that is Prof. Dr. Wan Muhammad Wan Daud. It is one of the Muslim scholars that are very active in the Islamic history. He says that from the perspective of Islam, decolonization is awareness of reaching the importance of higher education. It is because Islam is very stressed on the importance of childhood education and is rooted in the Quran and the tradition of the Prophet. As the education itself revolutionized the thinking and the way of the education of the person itself. And the childhood education, it can be seen very important as it creates the personality of a person, especially in the religion itself. As that if the parents educate them to be a Jew, it can be a Jew. If it can be if the parents educate the child to be a Christian, it can be a Christian, or neither a Zoroastrianist. Na'udzubillah min zalik. Okay, next, decolonization by Haji Naneshka. It is one of the lecturer in the University of Otago. He clearly said that the decolonization in the Muslim academy is again different from the liberal context. It is because that the most of the Western says that decolonization is free from the imperialist thinking that are brought from their perspective, from the imperialist perspective. It is not. It is very different. It is because decolonization is declaration can be stated when our hearts and our mind infused with the danger of universalization, Western which unscrupulously penetrates every part of the Islamic educational system. As the other presenter Afim says that when the imperialists start to colonize the Islamic nation, they force the people in the Islamic nation to leave Islam in very harsh and very sadist way. So it is from this perspective that Majid Danishgar said that we must as a Muslim we must against this ideology, because most of the ideologies is very dangerous and very against of Islam. As for example, the liberal for the liberal context, most of them are some of them are good, but some of them are very against of Islam, because they fight for the humanity, but didn't put the divine sources as the first priority. So in the teaching of Islam, it's very against from our divine reference, that is Quran and Sunnah. Okay, for the next, this is the decolonization by the four Muslim scholars, that is Edward Said, Syed Hussein Alatas, Ali Shariati, and Albert Huraini. He said that decolonization in the framework of tradition and modernity linked to several other concepts such as Orientalism, intellectual imperialism, hopeless intellectuals, and captive minds. The main focus of the discourse is to promote intellectual decolonization of all intellectual packages that are imported from the West. As the Western says that it's very liberal and very against of Islam itself. So as for example, the ideology of secularism, as for example, it is against of Islam, because it puts the Islam in other side, and the teaching and the Islam is found in the ibadah only for ibadah. Okay, it can be simplified that Professor Wan Muhammad Daud, that the decolonization in the aspect of education, for the Dr. Majid, it is emphasized in the concept of decolonization is the westernization of the thinking, and the last four scholars simplified that the decolonization is focused on the intellectual thinking of a person itself. Next, I will proceed Faiz for the other subtopic in the decolonization. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Faiz bin Abdullah, and my registration number is 2014079. And I'll be presenting on the effect of decolonization. So you can see that there are two aspects of the effect, which is the economic and the social aspect. For the economic part, it has three things, which is the inequality of economy, reduced industrialization, and less investment in infrastructure. For the social aspect, ethnic conflict and lack of nation identity. So let's go to the next slide. which are the economic aspect, we can see that for the first thing, which is the inequality of the economy. The decolonization has set up a system that called neocolonialism, which is this system is make the country itself controlled by the military or the politician. So for the second one, which is decolonization, can reduce industrialization. This means that decolonization it makes the skilled human labor will be decreased, and it will make the agriculture sector having difficulties in producing the raw materials, thus it affected by the industrialization. Okay, for the next, which is the decolonization, can make the investment become lesser in the infrastructure. So we can see that due to decolonization, there are many conflicts has occurred between the countries, because each country has its own perspective to progressing their country, and this will creating an anachronistic group. Okay, that's for the economic aspect. For the social aspect, we can see that there is big conflict and lack of nation identity. We can see that people have their own personal ideas and beliefs, which mean that the people itself they constantly has having a problem between themselves, because they have a personal idea and it will contradict to the others. And so for the lack of national identity, due to colonization, the country will have difficulties in organizing its people, and also the illegal immigrant can easily enter the country without a strict law. And that's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter, Brother Imran. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Imran Ismail. Okay, so now I will continue about my topic, which is issue on decolonization and the scope of that. A country must have four main things, that namely population, border, government, and sovereignty. So I will bring you here some issue about decolonization, especially in Malaysia, and the scope of chapter. Okay. Colonization, you know, not only affect the physical aspect, even with the complete package, which is local thought, culture, value, and ethics. Then the process of decolonization should also take place holistically and comprehensively today. We have been served by post-colonialism and decolonialism, which means decolonialism means recolonization in a new form, where we can see that it has a lot of impact on our society. In this era, intellectual decolonization is increasing challenges. So what is the colonization of thought, or we call it intellectual decolonization? Decolonization of thought is to free ourselves from influence of invader from the point of view of thought, or we call it epistemology. We can see from our culture point of view. Our culture is now more follow the Western culture. It is wrong for us to follow. It's not wrong, but this is there has a limit, because if we follow it too much, we will be confused. Which one is our culture identity?
Actually, we have national cultures, but it seems to be marginalized in our culture lifestyle today, which is to Western. That's about music. Okay. Today, genre of our music is so much to the West that is marginalized the original genre of our country. We can see it's very sad. Then we can see in the national event, there this colonization is still valid, whereby they use the Western song. So it's getting more worse now because technology is getting more sophisticated. Various culture colonization until there is a change of moral that contrary to the teaching of Islam and the teaching of our country. Then epistemology to epistemology. Okay. What is epistemology? Okay. The term epistemology comes from the Greek word which is epistemia and logos. Epistemia can be translated as knowledge or understanding, while logos can be translated as argument or reason. Okay, so shortly, epistemic arrogance means pride and intellectual grandeur, while epistemic humility can be means like be humble. Okay, which means we pretend we do not know something and listen about it with an open heart. Idea of epistemic humility, which means humility to learn is necessary to develop and integrated, sejahtera and ecology human being. Okay, there is three main character that we must have to reach epistemic humility. First one, the more knowledge, the more submission. The more knowledge you know, the more submission you to the God. Okay, then integrated and knowledgeable people. You must be a knowledgeable people. And third, practice what has been learned. What you learn, you practice it. And be the more submissive. Okay. Then I will also tell you the scope of sejahtera. Our own job as a nation is to develop thinking from our own philosophy by using our intellectual power and using the sources of philosophical thinking available in culture and religion. Effort to form a philosophy that is appropriate to the local situation that can overcome this negative influence by increasing the aspect of divinity that is believed in God, as we found in the pillar of our country. Today, how many people whose religion is only in white-cat document, but not in the amal or ethics. Man in Islam and man relationship with God as well as his relationship with nature has been said in the Quran, which is Hablunallah wa Hablunanas. It is also closely related to our nature. That is, human beings are not free to do whatever they want with nature. Instead, human beings must take care of nature, which means we can prosper this world, but we cannot destroy it. This is the element of gender. First one is intellectual, then cognitive or culture, then emotion, then physical dimension, spiritual and physicology. All these elements of sejahtera must be achieved to develop a balanced and harmonious human being from various aspects. All these elements make human being good as human being, which is ahsanul taqwim, by making our Prophet Muhammad as a role model. Okay. Okay. So this one is a step to inclusive, sejahtera, and ecology. Okay. First one, adhere to religious teaching, whereby we submission to Allah. Then independent spirit and patriotism. We must have a independent spirit and patriotism to make our country decolonize fully, whether it's on intellectual or physical. Okay, then importance of unity and harmony and community life. For we must be in harmony even with another person or another race, because we are one religion. Then for oppose all elements of extremism. Fifth, practice a high culture of knowledge. That's all from me. Thank you.
That's all from us.
From us.
And
Thank
thank you.
Thank you.